What's up, champs? Welcome to another episode of the Short Shifts Fantasy Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Keeping Karlsson. I'm your host, Jeremy Versillo, and joining me tonight, my pal and yours, Shams Benamor. Shams, how are you doing tonight? I know you are in the consolation finals of your Cupful Tier 3, is that correct?
Oh, yeah, and not to be a pessimistic, but when you're going against both Kucherov and Sidney Crosby, I'm happy to say at least that this consolation playoff doesn't really change anything. I'm already set to stay in Tier 3, so I'll put up a fight, but let's just say I'm not overly optimistic. I might be peeking to my other leagues to see how they're going.
Crosby had quite a night today. I know I was the victim of Jake Allen getting lit up in the third period by Crosby, so not thrilled about that, but my Cupful Finals matchup is going pretty well. But again, similar to you, it actually does not affect my promotion or relegation. Both myself and my opponent are already guaranteed a slot in Tier 1 next year, so kind of just playing for the trophy and to have some fun.
It's nice to have now, with the history of having the mega show have someone in Tier 1, it's nice to bring back having a nice short shift representation. Then next year, maybe Lewis and I can join in with you.
Yeah, I guess I'll be the only Keeping Karlsson host in Tier 1 next year, unfortunately. Well, let's get to the news. What's the first news item you have tonight? It's actually a pretty big shakeup out in Florida.
Yeah, it was just kind of bombshell that came out of nowhere. I wasn't really sure of anything that was happening like late last game with the Panthers, but basically what was announced was that Verhaeghe is out week to week, but expected for the playoffs. So it sounds like he's pretty hurt. You're like, you know what? You can rest, but we need you for the playoffs. And also, at the same time, Tkachuk is out tonight with an illness, as we've said in the past on multiple shows, and you'll hear later, is that these illnesses could be anything from a one-game thing to Pietrangelo that was like gone for weeks, so we'll have to keep an eye out on that. And misery loves company is with this. Ekblad also left the game and was announced not to return. I'm not sure exactly what happened. I believe there may have been a scuffle with a fight, and then he went to the locker room and never came back. But I'm not sure it was something where he was the main combatant. But basically just kind of have to be a wait and see, and the game's almost done, so maybe you'll know more about it than us. But basically 3 big losses, and kind of led to some interesting lines is that we had the obvious Tarasenko, Barkov, and Reinhardt. Reinhardt being backup, I guess when you have that many people out, you can't really spread the lines. And then you had the second line was Cousins, Bennett, and Okposo. And the really interesting thing here is you think with all these people out, hey, Rodrigues is going to find a spot in the top 6. Nope. And on top of that, it's Luostarinen and Tarasenko that move up to power play 1. So if you have Rodrigues, maybe stuff will get mixed up because they did lose to Montreal 5-3. But right now, it's not really looking good for Rodrigues, and also Bennett losing any kind of line mates at even strength.
Bennett did lose those line mates at even strength, but he just popped a short-handed goal, assisted by Kulikov and Lundell, so that's always nice. Gotta say, I'm really happy that I did not drop Tarasenko last week. He was on my short list to cut, but never needed to. I'd be pretty annoyed if I had missed out on the either 4 or 5 points he already has in 2 games. Gotta hope that Tkachuk is probably back Thursday. Seems like it's a short-term illness. 90% of the time when a guy is sick, he'll miss a couple days, and especially a superstar, he'll be back soon. The Ekblad injury, I kind of think is a blessing in disguise. If you're holding that guy, he has not really been helping you, and this is kind of just your permission to drop now that he's actually hurt. Twitter says it's an undisclosed injury, but I doubt he'll be useful for you Thursday or Saturday this week. Next up, Ryan Hartman was suspended for 3 games for being a moron, is probably the best description. He was upset that the ref missed a call, and kind of chucked his stick in the general direction of the ref. Definitely wasn't like trying to injure anybody, like it wasn't vicious, which is why it's only 3 games, which is I think the minimum for abusive official like that. But still just a really dumb thing to do, and he did come out and own it. But yeah, if you picked him up for this week, that's unfortunate. I guess that incident happened, I believe, Saturday, so you probably knew well enough to avoid him this week. Yeah, don't add him. Don't add anybody in his place. I don't think there's anyone relevant jumping up onto that top line either. Next piece of news, a bit close to home. Shane Wright got called up by the Kraken, played like 16 or 15 and a half minutes yesterday. I actually, today, at work, I pulled up the game and through an app that I have access to, I watched every single shift of Shane Wright's in consecutive order. And he looked really good out there. Like, he looked more comfortable with the puck. He was moving well off the puck. They actually gave him good line mates and some time on a power play unit. Amazing what happens when you do that. I believe he had 4 shots, was pretty good in the faceoff dot, which is always a struggle for young guys. I've got some pretty good confidence that he will be an NHL player next year. Fantasy relevant may still be a stretch on the Kraken. I mean, how many Kraken players are fantasy relevant to begin with? What do you think, Shams? Anything really actionable here? Especially with the Kraken only having 2 more games this week. I think this is just a good for him type of moment.
Oh yeah, I think we'll see. It's, lineups are weird, injuries or things, but like, basically the way I'm with you is that the fact that they actually gave him line mates is a lot of these times you'll bring up a young guy, you'll bring him on the 4th line, be like, why didn't you score? It's like, well, you only put him in defensive minutes. So the fact that he got basically, other than McCann and Beniers, probably 2 of their best offensive forwards. So they're putting him in a place to succeed. Also, probably with the way there's so few games left, he'll probably stick around. I don't see why they would send him back unless there's something special with the AHL team. So something to keep in mind and probably something to keep in your back pocket for when drafts come next year to have a little bit more data on this guy.
You mentioned the AHL team, but I'm pretty sure the Coachella Firebirds have locked themselves into a playoff spot. Also, the deadline for having to be on the AHL roster and have played a certain number of games to be eligible for the AHL playoffs has passed. So whenever the Kraken season ends, which will be in about 2 weeks because they are not making the playoffs, he'll probably go back down to the AHL and hopefully have another nice long playoff run. Their run last year ended in Game 7 of the finals in overtime, so it'll be nice to see him get some more big game experience along with some of the Kraken's other young players who he'll get to grow chemistry-wise with. We've got a pair of goalie news items. Why don't you take the first one, Shams?
So, basically, Jarry hasn't been playing for basically a week or so. I dropped him in a league, and I don't think he's played a game since, and that was like about a week or 2 ago. And just when he was set to play, he was announced out sick. That was Monday, and basically the word was he's battling pretty hard. So it sounds like it's not just like, it could be a flu or something of that sense. It doesn't seem like something where it's a 1-game thing, because even with the back-to-back that they have, they played him again, or Alex Nedeljkovic played yesterday and today, and I believe he got the win or is close to getting the win today. And so with them playing, I believe, Thursday, I would be surprised that A, Jarry's even in a physical position to play, and then B, with what Ned's giving you right now, that you would even want to play him, because Jarry wasn't doing that well before getting the bench, and it wasn't an injury that got him the bench at first, it was his play.
Yeah, he had been pretty bad in his last 4 or 5 starts. Another thing of note related to this is the Penguins called up Joel Blomqvist from the AHL Wilkes-Barre Scranton to back up Nedeljkovic for this game. So it sounds like Jarry's not even good enough to sit on the bench and come in a pinch. This is one of those cases where if it really is illness, which it sounds like it is, it must be something longer term, the flu, COVID, mono, that type of thing. Wishing him all the best, but I think you can safely drop him, because even if he gets one of the 2 games left this week, you probably don't want those numbers on your roster. Now to the other side of the state for Philadelphia's goalie situation. What do you have for us here?
So, sadly, when I said I dropped Jarry for a goalie, I picked up Ersson, which, oddly enough, we're using the couple rulings with the stats, so we'd be able to get negative points from goals allowed. It was actually, with how bad that Ersson has been playing, it would have been better for me to start Jarry in every single game without playing a single game than it would have been for me to pick up Ersson. And with that in mind, he has been benched, or at least all signs point to him being benched, because he had another poor outing on Monday. And in the first period, that's all he saw. And it was Fedotov that basically, I'm not really sure much of his history, but basically the idea was, I believe, that he was supposed to come to the NHL, but Russia said, hey, you got to do a year's of service in the military. So he did that and then had to play some KHL time. So luckily, he's checked all those boxes off. He came back, and I believe he literally just came to the States like maybe a week ago. So think of that, of just like coming to a new country all across here. Hell, you're probably still jet lagged at that point. This is just to show how bad that the coach thinks of Ersson, that they threw him in. And he actually did well. He had only allowed 2 goals and 21 shots during that time. And I forget the exact phrasing, but the coach said that he was the only good player that played that game, including all forwards, everyone. So, the coach there is known for having some interesting decisions, but I'd be very surprised if anyone other than him is starting the next game and games coming up.
He looked really good and has a pretty good track record in the KHL too. Before he did his year of military service, which is listed as did not play on a couple websites, which is always kind of sad to see. He was like a 920, 925 goalie for a team. He came back this year and was only a 914, but his goals against average was pretty low. The KHL is generally a lower scoring league. So I'm not sure how those numbers compare to his peers. Another thing to note is he's already 26, so he's kind of pretty matured. It's not going to be any concern about workload or growing into it. I think there's a good chance he could go 50-50 the rest of the way. Next year's situation is going to be really interesting because they have another Russian goalie who I think is considering coming over with the opening that is in the Flyers crease right now, or maybe with how close to the playoffs they are this year. Maybe they'll just sign someone and, try to catch lightning in the bottle with the next Jack Campbell or Cam Talbot or whoever those goalies that sign $5 million for 5 years and then are terrible. I would not recommend they do that, but I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, this is going to be that team that you probably kind of have if you're going that zero goalie strategy, I feel like Philly's going to have that option because, A, you're going to have to guess who's going to get the start, and unless Philly turns things around, it looks like they may have come back to their pumpkin form.
Agreed. Next up, some injury news. TJ Oshie unexpectedly missed the game today, which is unfortunate because I know a number of people streamed him for a nice 4-game schedule this week with no Tom Wilson. Well, no Tom Wilson today, but Wilson will be back on Thursday. Oshie sounds like he's been battling something and is kind of popping in and out of the lineup. I know there was a question of whether or not he'd even be able to play his 1,000th game when they had a whole tribute planned for him. And his teammates were like, we're going to drag you out here if it means you get to play. I don't know if he'll be back Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or is it Thursday, Friday, Sunday they play? Whatever days they play. Kind of sounds like there's a chance he could be, but also he, could be back for Thursday and then miss the next 2. Keep him in your IR if you can. He's a good start. Just frustrating situation at this point in the season. Got a couple close to returners and a couple actual outjuries. Who's close to returning, Shams?
So we're seeing some good news, and basically just kind of, none of these are confirmed yet, but Chabot is looking like he'll be back, quote unquote, soon from the coach. Radko Gudas has been practicing a couple of times. I don't think it's been with the team, but he's been on his own. So anytime you get any news out of Anaheim, I'll take that. So the fact that he's practicing, hopefully he's not playing tonight, so maybe you might get him for the next few games, the fantasy playoffs. And then the last one, this one is going to be interesting, is that, everyone's joking about how Thomas Hertl, anytime Vegas trades for an injured player or something, they're circumventing the cap and all that. But it looks like he has the potential of playing Friday. Now, this is going to be that sketchy situation, is that it's only going to be 1 game, but he did shred the no contact jersey, so he actually practiced with the team, full contact. And there is a possibility that he could play Friday, and it should be interesting. At the very least, even if you're not picking him up. I want to see what kind of lines he's going to be. Sounds like he might be on the wing to see what other Golden Knight might get the boost with him being on the ice.
I'm not particularly familiar with cap math, so I can't quite tell from looking at Cap Friendly if they're able to activate him and fit him in, but I'm assuming they will be able to, and yeah, he'd be nice to activate from your IR. I wouldn't waste a move picking him up at this point for just a Friday game, but if you can activate him from your IR, play him Friday, and then drop for a Saturday-Sunday streamer, that's great. Last but not least, some actual outjuries. Morgan Reilly returned today, and you recently informed me who was playing on the power play in his place, who you can definitely drop. Who was that?
Connor Timmins, of all people. I honestly, if you told me asked me what team he was on, I wouldn't be sure that I could even tell you he was a Leaf. So somehow, I guess, with all the woes, because currently the power play right now is 0 for 15. I guess that, even with all the skill power that they have, they're still unable to break through. So hopefully with their next game, I believe they play tomorrow, but basically the coach said that Reilly is available to return for tomorrow. So I'll take that as he's back. So maybe he might be enough to boost him up, but it might just be a situation where, as said previously, Marner's close, but not coming back yet. So I'm not sure if I'm interested in any power play quarterback until Marner comes back, maybe.
It's been pretty rough out there. I do agree that Marner may be the straw that stirs the drink on that power play. It also could just be some random variance. Let's hope his return is as good as Vince Dunn's return. Vince Dunn came back, had a couple shots, a couple blocks, a point. So he's looking right back into the Kraken lineup as one of their top scorers and their number one defenseman. Get him back if you can, but again, he's someone you can drop Friday or you can drop after Friday's game for a Saturday-Sunday streamer, assuming your playoffs end this week. With that, let's go to a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to finish off with a few hot and cold streaks of guys that may or may not be useful for the rest of your playoffs. Sometimes in the tight world of fantasy hockey, a hot streak like this is what can win you your league on championship week. So who do you have hot for us first, Shams?
First one is kind of an interesting one because it's been going for a while. Philipp Kurashev of Chicago, and this is before today's game because I think he has an assist already today, is that he has 14 points in his last 10 games, and he is playing with Bedard both at even strength and on the power play. And you're like, oh, why are you telling me about this player? He's playing this well for this long. He must not be available in my league. Well, the interesting thing is that I would say Cupful is a great representation of people in the know of with free agents, and only 68% of leagues actually had Kurashev. And most likely, what I believe what happened, because this is how I ended up getting him, is that with the tight semifinal matchups and the horrendous schedule last week, you may have not been able to meet your threshold for the busy nights because he does play for Chicago. But if you're able to get him in for the remainder of the week, he's getting points, especially say maybe he doesn't get many shots or whatnot. So possibly in a categories league, where an assist or two might turn the swing or a random power play point. This is someone to keep an eye on.
His two remaining matchups are Saturday and Sunday against Dallas and Minnesota. So you can maybe even play the waiting game and see how long you can wait before picking him up. He's been really good. I was actually talking with some friends about him earlier today and how he was pretty good early in the season and then had a nice lull in his stats where he was like a half point per game player again, which just coincidentally coincided with Connor Bedard being out with a jaw injury. I think he may be a modern day Chris Kunitz, where until the Hawks' better prospects come up, he's just going to be dragged to fantasy relevance by Bedard, as opposed to being the middle six type of player that he looked like before that and kind of projects to be at his age. Another hot streak you have for us, William Eklund has been really hot on the power play lately, you've been telling me. And it goes back to, I saw a tweet the other day, unfortunately I couldn't find it again, so I can't quote it exactly or give credit, but I believe over the last handful of games, maybe it was 2 weeks or a month, the Sharks were one of the better power plays in the NHL, which is kind of crazy because we just mentioned how, Toronto's 0 for their last 15. Yeah, why don't you just get the Sharks' elite power play unit that also just traded Anthony Duclair? So what would you be doing with William Eklund? He actually has a better schedule coming up with Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday games against LA, St. Louis, and Arizona, who are a bit more beatable teams at this point.
So it really kind of depends on what kind of league you're in, because first I would say is that Zetterlund and Granlund would be my first go-to players, because they also are on the top line as well and play well with each other. So if you're in a league where, say, both of those players are taken and you're still interested in the potential of power play points and some random points here or there, I would be really interested in Ekblad because, as you said, with the 3 games left, kind of depends on your situation with injuries. Maybe you had an Oshie and now you want to fill him in. This is kind of a person where maybe at the start of the week I wasn't, say it's my number one target, but when you're scrapping just for anyone at the fantasy playoffs, I think you could do worse than Ekblad.
Eklund definitely is a tough sell in leagues where, shots and hits matter. He doesn't shoot a ton, although most of his points are assists, so I'm not too worried about the shooting percentage side of things. He only has 1 hit in his last 9 games. He does have about a block per game, though. That's not terrible. His ice time's pretty good. For reference, Granlund is 94% owned in Cupful, so you're probably not getting him. I was fortunate enough to get him in a couple leagues this week, but he's mostly owned. Kurashev, you mentioned, was 68% owned. Similarly, Zetterlund is 66% owned, so that may be hit or miss if they're available in your leagues. But Eklund is only 26% owned, so he's much more widely available if you need someone to finish out your Thursday, Saturday, Sunday for your fantasy team. Now, unfortunately, onto the cold streaks. Shane Pinto is a name I haven't heard in a while, and I've been seeing Ottawa score a couple times recently, and he has not been on there. What's he been up to?
So this is kind of a lie that you would think that when I would be opening up with the hot streaks. He has 4 points in the last 5 games, but the funny thing is, all of those 4 points came in 1 game against Buffalo. So basically, he had one monster of a game, and then he's basically have done nothing other than 2 shots, a hit. And the weird thing is as you're saying, is that I have a couple Ottawa fans as friends. They're doing the old, they're out of the playoffs, they're going to win now, and just have their draft capital be weakened. So it's not like they're getting 1 or 2 goals a game. They're actually getting points, but for some reason, it's kind of a, you talk about IPP and those kind of things, is that Pinto's not being involved with it, even though he's on the top line with Tkachuk, which would be the kind of the person you'd want to be with, other than maybe Stützle. And then he is kind of on, I say power play too, but it just kind of, if you look at their lines, it's a mess. So really the way I look at this is that this is kind of where I kind of want to maybe separate the player from the situation, is that hey, he might be on the top line. He might be, have some pedigree behind him, but you don't have time to wait for variance to fix itself. Sure, you might drop him. You might end up with a 5-point game. It could easily happen the next game, but I'm not sure I'm in a position to be eating zeros or basically nothings in a matchup that is literally my last matchup of the year.
Pinto also has 3 more games remaining this week, similar to the San Jose guys. His games are against Florida, New Jersey, and Washington. So here's a question for you. Of the 4 guys we just talked about in the hot streak section, including the 2 additional San Jose ones you mentioned, in Pinto, how would you rank those 5?
I would put, probably for myself, I would have Zetterlund and Granlund as the top 2. Then I would have Kurashev, and then I believe I would put Pinto. But the thing is that this is good. The dance is that maybe I would put Eklund above Pinto, but the idea is probably Pinto's already on your team and you don't have to use a move to keep him. So I would probably say that if Zetterlund or Granlund's on your free agency, I would be fine spending a move to replace Pinto with him. The other 2, with maybe giving a little bit more benefit to Kurashev, I might lead to using a move for him, but I would be fine if you said, hey, I would rather test the variance with Pinto and not use a move in a move limited league to pick up either Eklund or say, someone else of Kurashev's ilk in that situation.
I definitely think you have better people to drop than Shane Pinto if you're looking to pick someone up, because I'd even rather drop a 2-game player or 2 remaining game player than a 3-game Pinto at this point. I think I would probably have the Zetterlund Granlund first, just because they've been hot lately and it looks pretty sustainable. I'd have Pinto after that, and then Kurashev, and then Eklund still. Just kind of trusting the deployment and the longer-term track record. I also like the fact that maybe not the last 2 games, but longer-term Pinto shoots and hits a bit more than Eklund and Kurashev do. So I think that, in theory, gives a safer floor. But like you said, variance is variance, and in 3 games, you can't really predict outcomes with that. You just gotta take the chances that you believe in and look at the schedule and the deployment and pick your poison. Last but not least, you have a bit of a crazy cold streak on here. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, so this is kind of like the same situation as Pinto, but as less kind of egregious. So basically what it is that I'm not including tonight's game, but he has 0 points in the last 3 games. You know, hey, things could happen. But in the last 10 games, he's only gotten points in 4 of them. So this is kind of that dance of, you know, saying that he only got points in those last 4 of the 10 games. He did get 8 points, 3 goals and 5 assists. So this is kind of the situation is that with that Elias Pettersson, it depends on, I would feel like, just gotta have to keep him, because what the idea is that if he goes off in one of those games, he could probably get you enough points that, say if he gets like 2 goals and an assist in one game and does nothing in the other 2, you'd be like, oh, that sucks. But like if he got like a goal in 2 of those games and an assist on the third, you're probably like, I probably wish he'd get me more, but it would be fine. So the fact is that this is kind of a situation where maybe I trust Vancouver more than Ottawa, and also that power play, while he may not be involved with it, he's still got JT Miller and Quinn Hughes there that are an ilk above the people that, while sure good, are in Ottawa. It's just that kind of situation is that I would be in a situation while he's not kind of that stable player. It's lightning in a bottle that could pop at any point.
I would have a really hard time dropping him, but to play devil's advocate, Vancouver plays tonight and tomorrow, and after that, they only play Saturday. Let's say, hypothetically, you have a full lineup so that if you dropped Pettersson, you could replace him with someone Saturday. Maybe not someone as good. And you could also drop him for a Thursday, Friday, Sunday streamer that fit your lineup. All of a sudden, you're talking about 4 games of, let's just say, an Oshie or Granlund level player, since those 2 are the first ones that come to mind. Like 4 games of a quality streamer, but obviously still a streamer, instead of 1 game of Pettersson. That's the type of gamble that I would strongly consider. I'm not sure if I could convince myself to drop, Pettersson, Miller, Hughes, but some of those other Canucks are ripe for, gaming my favorite quantity over quality belief in fantasy hockey. Not really recommending it, just some food for thought, because there's definitely a couple ways to approach this. I actually learned this year in some of my playoffs and late season matchups that maybe quantity over quality isn't always the right solution. I had some pretty good quality moves where I picked up a 2-game guy that I liked over a 3-game guy that was bad. So just some food for thought to close us out on what is our, I believe, second to last short shift of the year, Shams. Anything else to add?
It's really just kind of to piggyback on what you're saying. It's really the more thing of just kind of each league is different, and it just really talks about how many moves you have, because I've already used 3 moves of my 4 in both of my leagues that I'm in right now. So I'm not sure how much I'm going to be using that move to drop someone of that quality. But if you're in a league that has any more moves, or in a situation where maybe you had a cakewalk semifinals and you're able to load up, maybe that's where you get to play those mind games. So it is something to kind of keep in mind, because I believe it was was it last year or the year before that Kakufel had the uproar of someone dropping Ovechkin in the playoffs because of a weird schedule situation. So sometimes, and I believe that person ended up actually winning their Kakufel division, if I remember correctly. So, not to say, do it, but sometimes, especially with the playoffs, those crazy things are a little less crazy when you have such a short time frame that you need to work towards.
Yeah, as long as you can kind of back up your thinking and want to take a chance on something like that, I think it's absolutely viable to do. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to give us a follow at ShortShiftsKK, as well as Brian and Elon at Keepin' Carlson. Please use www.gamedaytweets.com to get all the best info from Twitter without having to slog through the rest of the place. It includes team-by-team and searchable tweets by player name. Visit that site and the other great sites we use to research our episodes with at Yahoo, Frozen Tools, Natural Stat Trick, Dauber, and, of course, the Kakufel website. Kakufel.com/tools has lots of tools, some made by Elon, some made by Kevin. They're very useful. Our intro and outro music was created by Pat Roach, and John Reed is our digital media producer. Until we see you next time, play smart and keep your shifts short.